Poison is an American glam metal band which achieved a lot of commercial success in the mid-1980s through the mid-1990s, and they would go on to sell over 45 million records worldwide. And unlike a lot of bands from that 80s era, they never broke up, instead undergoing lineup changes. Fast forward now to 2008, and Poison's drummer Rikki Rockett would be arrested in Los Angeles at LAX airport as he disembarked from a flight from New Zealand. The 46-year-old drummer at the time was arrested on outstanding rape charges as he made his way through customs. The arrest stemmed from an alleged incident that happened a year prior in September of 2007, where a Mississippi woman residing in Neshoba County claimed the Poison's drummer forced himself on her. The drummer would put out a statement on his MySpace page following the arrest saying, "I was exhausted from a 14-hour flight and then was hauled off to jail. The worst part was having to walk past my fiancée in handcuffs. She had no idea what was happening and neither did I. When I was finally told what I was arrested for, I almost passed out," he'd say. At the end of the day, Rockett would be exonerated on all the charges as the Neshoba County District Attorney dropped the charges after Rockett was able to prove he was not in Mississippi at the time of the alleged incident. According to the drummer, he was in LA watching his fiancée try on wedding dresses. It turned out someone was using Rockett's name to convince women to sleep with him. The warrant which had been issued for Rikki Rockett also listed the name John Minskoff, but Rockett's real name is Richard Ream, and the Poison drummers never used the alias John Minskoff before. The press, of course, had a field day with the story, and Rockett would claim that Minskoff was, and I quote, "a violent career criminal and felon and convicted perjurer with multiple convictions who is admitted to impersonating rock stars to pursue women." He even went on to slam the press for not Googling Minskoff's name, where they would have come across an alleged event where Minskoff pretended to be a member of Whitesnake to kidnap a 15-year-old girl. Following his release, Rockett held an exoneration party which raised money for the Centurion Ministries, which is an organization that helps those who've been wrongfully convicted. Rockett soon turned his attention to the press, saying in a statement on his MySpace page, "I received undying support from my band, friends, and fans, but unfortunately my detractors had a field day with the story. I look forward to serving the press who created defamatory remarks some healthy lawsuits," he'd say. It was a story that seemed to spread through the rock community in Los Angeles before it even hit the tabloids. Former Kiss drummer Peter Criss was living homeless under the Santa Monica Pier, spending his nights sleeping on the floor of a nearby men's bathroom. But it had a happy ending. He would be saved by two Hollywood actors and musician who heard about the plight of the drummer. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Oh wait, there's more. Well, as it turned out, the story wasn't even remotely close to being true. That's what we're going to explore in today's video, and how it all culminated with literally all the players in the story confronting one another on national television. You can't blame people for thinking the story was true. If you were going to impersonate a rock star, why not pick one that wears makeup on stage and has been out of the public spotlight for quite some years? It was 1991, and it had been over a decade since the Catman Peter Criss had either left or was fired by Kiss. He was living a quiet life, which was in sharp contrast to his days in Kiss telling Spin magazine, "I lived an insane life for so many years that it almost made me effing nuts." By 1991, Criss had cleaned up his act. He was living in Redondo Beach with his former Playboy Playmate wife Deborah Jensen and raising their daughter together. He was also working on an autobiography and playing with other musical acts and writing solo material. On New Year's Day 1991, Criss was at LAX airport on his way to New York City to visit his 62-year-old mother who was dying from cancer. As he waited to board the flight, he saw an issue of Star magazine at one of the newsstands. It had a 2-page story devoted to the former Kiss drummer and how he had fallen on hard times. Titled "Kiss Star Hits the Skids," Star magazine had allegedly interviewed a homeless Criss. He would recall in his book Makeup to Breakup, My Life In and Out of Kiss, "I was blown away. There was a photo of some bum who was claiming to be me lying in the toilets in Santa Monica, and next to it was a photo of me in my Kiss makeup. I was furious," he'd remember. It would turn out that Chris's mother would unfortunately pass away before the drummer's plane touched down in New York. His mother had heard about the Star story, and Criss had been unable to clarify it to her. It would be celebrities Roseanne Barr and her then husband Tom Arnold, and Crosby, Stills and Nash drummer Dallas Taylor, who came to the fake Peter Criss's rescue. Arnold would end up venturing down to the Santa Monica Pier and offered help to the Imposter. He would tell the local Wisconsin radio station WAPL that he initially met resistance from some of the homeless people congregating around the Imposter since he was their meal ticket. The Imposter was dealing with substance abuse issues relating to alcohol, and Arnold attempted to get him into the same rehab clinic he'd previously attended himself. The story took an even more bizarre turn when one of Chris's former alleged lovers, a woman named Sherry Ann Thompson, got in touch with Tom Arnold. She would send the Imposter a first-class ticket to come stay with her and her mother in Massachusetts. The Imposter would get himself thrown off the plane for disorderly conduct while under the influence of alcohol and would show up to Massachusetts late. Cheryl Ann Thompson would tell People magazine what happened the moment she laid eyes on the Imposter at the airport, remembering, "I almost threw up when he stepped off the plane." It would be People magazine who exposed the whole hoax. It had turned out the man living at the Santa Monica Pier pretending to be Kiss drummer Peter Criss was a 39-year-old man named Christopher Dickinson who was from Illinois. People magazine would interview Dickinson, who would tell the magazine, "It just got to be well known around Santa Monica that that's who I was. I'd gotten my real ID stolen. Why I said it, I don't really know. I was just very confused, very mixed up from alcohol," he'd say. The Imposter would know enough, though, about Chris's life to fool people for years, and Spin magazine would claim that the whole ruse started when Dickinson was in a bar one night, several years earlier, and someone mistook him for the former Kiss drummer. He played along and drank for free the whole night, so he continued with the hoax. Getting back to Dickinson's plane ride to Massachusetts, it would turn out that Cheryl Ann Thompson felt bad for Dickinson and let him stay with her anyways, telling TV program Hard Copy, "I felt pretty compelled to help this person because he did indeed fly across the country." He would end up spending several weeks with Thompson and her mother, who took the opportunity to bask in the media spotlight. Thompson and her mother would make the rounds, appearing on Geraldo Rivera and Phil Donahue's talk show, doing interviews with People magazine and Hard Copy. But in another strange turn of events for the story, it's pretty rare for magazines or newspapers to turn down sensational stories like this. But Spin magazine claimed they declined an interview with Thompson because they felt her and her mother were just opportunity seekers. Spin magazine would publish the following in their article, saying, "Spin declined to pay Cheryl Ann for her story, but she suddenly appeared at the magazine's New York offices anyways, following a taping of the Geraldo show. She had some Polaroids of her with a member of Air Supply, and she would also claim to the magazine that Peter Criss's wife, and I quote, hates her, and the magazine would go on to claim that her mother wanted assurances of signed contracts with money transfers. But the magazine grew weary, wondering if the pair were pulling a con, and abruptly canceled the interview. Criss would confess how crazy his life had gotten with all the media attention, telling Spin magazine, "Suddenly I'm forced to come out. Pictures of my house are in magazines all across the country. Roseanne Barr is calling me on the phone. There's people hanging around wherever I go. It's like, come on, I just got back from burying my mother." We were actually hounded by reporters during the funeral, he'd remember. Criss would end up suing Star magazine, and then he ended up getting an offer from his manager to appear on the Phil Donahue show. His manager thought it was a great opportunity to clear the air and confront his imposter, as well as his alleged former lover. He would agree to do the Donahue show. That episode of the Phil Donahue show would air on February 5th, 1991, and would also feature a hardcore Kiss fan, Tom Arnold, as well as Peter Criss's ex-wife, who called into the show, and his current wife at the time, who was in the audience. Here's a snippet of what transpired on that day.
That's how Peter looked 10 years ago, and it isn't true. The Kiss star did not hit the skids. This is not Peter Criss. Kindly welcome the real Peter Criss.
How you doing? Why couldn't you impersonate like the Lone Ranger or a Tano or something like that?
Yeah, sure.
You've really given me a rocky time.
You want to say something to Peter?
Well, through all this, I can't tell you how sorry I am about it.
I don't really blame you. I blame the star. On the phone. You, I don't know, and I don't know you either. And you called my house constantly, upsetting me and my child. And that made me very angry.
And you're lying, and you have a lot more to lose than I do.
I have what?
And I have witnesses.
You do?
Oh, yes,
Where do I know you from?
Peter, I remember you.
You remember me?
You came to my home in Clifton at
when?
3 o'clock in the morning. This was back in 81, 82. We were living in Clifton.
81, 82?
And you were private.
I was living in Darien, Connecticut with my child.
Private?
And
you were
my
with
wife.
Jerry Shirley in private
Who?
the night that I met you. The drummer in Humble Pie.
I don't know him.
That's okay.
Just briefly now, you went down to where? Santa Monica to look for your old pal,
Peter, that you read was in the gutter as you read it in Star. Is that so?
Yeah, that's right. I went down to the Santa Monica Pier and looked around for a few hours, and then I finally I found out where I thought he was staying, and couldn't find him the first night. The second night I came back, I saw a guy with about 10 other homeless guys around him. He's like an entourage, like Elvis, and I figured that's got to be him, and so I took him out to eat and got him some food, and we talked about getting him in a hospital, and he just didn't look enough like the real Peter Criss, but who knows what alcohol does to you, and so we pursued that, and we got him a hospital to go into. Then this woman that's sitting there, I get a call from her. We're going to put him in the hospital the next Monday. She calls and says, I'm his ex-girlfriend. I've talked to him for 5 hours. It is the real Peter Criss. Because I asked her, I said, are you sure it's the real guy? You should see this guy.
And I asked if you were sure.
How would I know? I wasn't the one that slept with him.
Let me say, there's not a woman here doesn't empathize with this circumstance. What are your thoughts as you listening in on this?
Well, I know that 8 years ago I was pregnant with my child, and he was probably with me every day. And he has been, I think, in the last 13 years. I think we've been apart once, and that was in Tennessee.
Hi, Phil. This is Lydia Criss. I would like to speak to Cheryl Ann. Hi, Peter. Hi, Debbie. How you doing?
Okay.
Good.
Now, Lydia, this is your first wife.
Absolutely.
You wanted to say.
I want to know from Cheryl Ann who I was marrying 8 years ago, because I really don't think she's telling the truth.
All right.
Craig Getch?
I didn't know Craig 8 years ago.
Are you married to Craig Getch?
Yes, I am. Well, what did I have to do with Privates? Privates was closed by the time I met Craig.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I didn't know Craig. I didn't know him 8 years ago.
We've got two.
A married man is not going to admit to an extramarital affair, number one.
Yeah, but you're the one.
Every wife would say that.
One.
Well, look at you and look at my wife, and let's face it.
Cheryl Ann and her mom didn't mention that they called me and Rosie and asked us for $10,000.
What?
They said they said they were going to lose their condominium because this guy was.
That's true.
They hadn't paid rent because they had to fly him out.
Right.
And they needed the money.
There was no quote of 10,000.
No quote of money, but
We did use the condo money, but there was not 10,000.
Why don't you ignore this guy? You're a Kiss freak, are you?
Peter Criss freak, then Kiss freak.
Right.
Big fan
And you
of
wanted to
Peter's.
say what?
I just wanted to say, when I first heard about it, I had the same reaction that all the members of the Kiss Army did. We were shocked. But when I first saw the article, just being a Kiss fan for years, me and about 10 other friends automatically knew that it wasn't Peter Criss. Yes, I understand that what alcohol can do to one's face, but we knew. It was unanimous. 10 guys, that's not Peter. We laughed it and threw it away. Basic fans, and you knew this man.
In 1993, Criss and Star Magazine would settle out of court, with the drummer getting a large sum of cash over the false story. Former Dream Theater drummer Mike Portnoy is considered by some to be one of the greatest drummers around today, so it probably seemed like the worst person to choose if you were an imposter. The story starts in 2003. People around New York City started noticing a man claiming to be Portnoy who was heavily medicated and intoxicated wandering around the city. Soon enough, the drummer's website would be inundated with stories from people who met the imposter. The first story that surfaced about the imposter involved a man named Carlin Langley who went up to a gay bar in New York City around February of 2003. It was there that Langley met a man claiming to be Portnoy. Langley, who had never heard of Dream Theater or Portnoy, would tell the New York Post, he told me he'd just come back from Japan where he'd signed an endorsement deal with a drum manufacturer. He had a lot of detailed information about Portnoy's life, he'd remember. After several drinks, the pair returned to Langley's apartment where they were intimate. And according to the New York Post, the next morning, the imposter had left the apartment with both of Langley's cell phones, his keys, and wallet. And when Langley called the bank, he discovered the imposter had already racked up $1,000 in credit card bills. Langley would find Mike Portnoy's real website and email the drummer, letting him know someone was impersonating him around the city. Soon enough, more gay men would come forward detailing their encounters with the impersonator. According to dreamtheater.net, one person who came in contact with the imposter would claim, and I quote, "I wanted to somehow get word to Mike that there's a guy in New York City who's pretending to be Mike, picking guys up at bars, restaurants, and on the street, convincing them that he's Mike Portnoy, the world-famous drummer from Dream Theater. He has all their music CDs, knows every beat of every song, and has Mike's schedule, both past and present, down to a T. He says he's been struggling with his sexuality lately." And it wasn't only gay men that the impersonator fooled, as it was other musicians as well. The New York Post detailed a music promoter and singer named Ray Freeman, who fronted a band called Block 16. He met the imposter at a bar called Finally Fred's, and it would turn out that Freeman's band was in need of a drummer, and the imposter jumped at the chance to jump behind the drum kit. According to Finally Fred's bartender who told the Post, he drank here all week but never paid his tab, which amounted to $70. And when Freeman saw the imposter again, he would tell the Post, "He told us that his mother was dying of cancer, his wife was divorcing him, and that Dream Theater had cancelled its tour because of the Iraq War, so I kind of felt sorry for him." Freeman and his band members from Block 16 felt so bad for the fake Portnoy that they let him sleep on their couches. When it came time for them to jam with the imposter, it was apparent from the start he wasn't a drummer. On March 28, 2003, at their first rehearsal, Freeman recalled he was, and I quote, "without his own sticks and any of the charts he'd said he'd written." Freeman described the impersonator's drumming as worse than my grandmother. That's when Freeman became suspicious, and while the imposter bore some resemblance to the real Mike Portnoy, that's when Freeman started to find photos of the real drummer and look at his tattoos and compared them to the imposter, and he soon realized that something wasn't right. Soon enough, Freeman found Portnoy's website and emailed the drummer, letting him know that someone was impersonating him. Freeman also noticed that some of his possessions were missing, including a vintage Les Paul guitar, his gold chain, and a set of house keys. And on April Fool's Day 2003, Freeman called the police, and soon enough, the authorities questioned the imposter, who turned out to be a man named Carlos Mendez. Mendez claimed to the authorities that he was the real Mike Portnoy, but soon after, the police took Mendez down to the police station where the real Mike Portnoy was waiting. Mendez would be charged with criminal impersonation and grand larceny, with bail being set at $100,000. But the story doesn't end there. One day following the arrest, a message would be posted on Dream Theater's website claiming that more than 4 victims came forward within a 48-hour period. It would also come out around this time that, according to Blabbermouth, another musician fell for Mendez's scam. It would be guitarist Chris Cafferty, who played in the band Savatage, who took to his own website and posted his own meeting with Mendez, revealing that even though Savatage played on the same bill as Dream Theater in the past, he had never met Portnoy in person. He would also go on to say, "A few days later in the city, I was introduced to who was supposed to be Mike. The guy had the whole bar fooled. He obviously did a whole bunch of research on Mike and his career and family. He apparently had stolen his wallet and cell phone. He had his ID, so who was to know? The guy knew very serious business details and family members of Mike's. He was even recognized by people as Mike Portnoy when I was with him. He held phone conversations on my phone with supposed mutual friends." But it wasn't until Cafferty got into a room to jam with Mendez that he realized the man was an imposter because he couldn't play the drums. Cafferty would also go on to reveal that Mendez went as far as to contact drum companies and get free products sent to him using Portnoy's name. Things wouldn't end there though, as in 2006 Mendez resurfaced and Portnoy would take to the internet to warn people about emails he'd received about Mendez impersonating him once again. One of the most recent rock imposter stories, though, dates back to 2014. It was during one of the last years of former Velvet Revolver and Stone Temple Pilots frontman Scott Weiland's life. Weiland at this point in time was playing in a band called the Wildabouts, and today we'll discuss how one man not only fooled the police, but news outlets who went along with the story and thought he was the real Scott Weiland. A year and a half before his death, TMZ would report that Scott Weiland had been arrested for stealing razor blades from a Beverly Hills pharmacy and for drug possession. The arrest happened on or around July 26, 2014, and the story seemed plausible given Weiland's past arrest history and his trouble with drugs. TMZ had broken the news story, but it would turn out the man who was arrested was not Weiland, and the whole misunderstanding that followed was due to a colossal screw-up by the police. TMZ would originally report at the time that Weiland was in jail for about a month or so charged with both burglary and a felony possession of a controlled substance. According to TMZ's original story, Weiland made the mistake of trying to shoplift razor blades from a Beverly Hills Rite Aid, and when a security guard tried stopping him, Weiland made his way out of the store. Weiland was reported to be carrying an insulated bag, so the security systems in the store wouldn't be set off. A police officer would end up tracking the fake Weiland a block or so away. Upon searching the suspect, they found illegal drugs, and TMZ would claim in their original story that Weiland pulled a celebrity card, telling cops, and I quote, "I'm Scott Weiland from Stone Temple Pilots," but the cops arrested him anyways. TMZ would go on to report that Weiland had been in jail, unable to make the $95,000 bond, and the cops charged him with burglary instead of theft because, according to the authorities, he entered the Rite Aid with the intent of stealing items because he was carrying an insulated bag. The cops were so sure they had arrested Scott Weiland that the Beverly Hills Police Department would issue a press release with the headline "Celebrity Arrest." It had turned out the man that the police had arrested was named Jason Hurley, and he was 2 years younger than Weiland and had red hair instead of black hair, which Weiland was sporting at the time. The first update to the story came a few days after the news of the arrest circulated online. It had turned out Weiland had apparently posted bail because a barber at Shorty's Barbershop shared a photo on social media showing Weiland in the store on August 9th. The next update came in the form of a video statement from Weiland, as you can see here.
A nice piece of fiction from TMZ saying that I was in jail and have been for 4 months. I've actually been touring, writing, and recording.
Even after the video statement from Weiland was released online, TMZ would stand by their story, claiming they spoke to the LA County Sheriff's Department, who confirmed Weiland was still in custody, saying they did a physical check on the inmate. Then the Sheriff's Department issued another statement, reversing their previous statement saying they had not arrested Weiland. The police would admit they had no idea who was in jail, and after asking the inmate questions about Weiland's career, it became apparent the man was an imposter. The police would claim the imposter looked identical to Weiland, and they would be filing an additional charge of furnishing false information to a police officer. Then there was another update provided by the Sheriff's Department, who summarized just how big of a screw-up the whole thing was. The department's press office apparently didn't know the cops had fingerprinted the suspect and knew it was Hurley and not Weiland since he was already in their database. The press office then wrote a press release celebrating the celebrity arrest, and the district attorney's office had the case written as the People versus Scott Weiland. Once more information came to light, though, they amended the case to read the People versus Jason Hurley. This is a story that happened over more than a decade ago. In 2008, the public and David Lee Roth himself first learned about the imposter. In July of that year, it was reported by multiple music news sites that a man claiming to be the Van Halen frontman was pulled over for erratic driving in Brantford, Ontario in Canada, telling the police he was the Van Halen frontman and that he was having an allergic reaction to peanuts. Police would wait with the man until emergency medical services arrived to take him to a nearby hospital, where he told the staff the same story. Following his release from hospital, the imposter was spotted at a local bar posing for pictures and doing karaoke with several of the nurses from that hospital. Rolling Stone magazine would report about his appearance at the karaoke place, saying the man was wearing expensive clothes and a hospital bracelet. The Star newspaper would reveal that the man posing as David Lee Roth was named David Kuntz from Cambridge, Ontario. He had a long history of posing as the Van Halen frontman, including performing with a house band at a local bar. According to Enemy, the whole story fell apart after some of the Star's readers recognized the imposter and informed the police of what he was up to. TMZ would end up reaching out to the real David Lee Roth, who was out on tour with Van Halen, and clarified that he is in fact not allergic to peanuts, but is, and I quote, allergic to criticism. David Kuntz years earlier was at the center of a 1989 murder trial involving a love triangle between him and two other women. Kuntz was in a relationship with a woman named Kim Blinkhorn, but when he told her he was leaving her to be with another woman named Rowena Parsons, with whom he had a child with, Blinkhorn would end up murdering Parsons in front of Kuntz and Parsons' 3-year-old daughter. Blinkhorn would claim Kuntz convinced her to carry out the act, but he was found not guilty, and Blinkhorn pleaded insanity and was found not guilty of the crime. It came out during the trial that Blinkhorn paid for Kuntz's lifestyle and supported his band by working multiple jobs. Never a person to let a tragedy go to waste, Kuntz used the murder to get free things. The owners of a local hair salon in Cambridge told the media that Kuntz told them about the murder in order to get free services, including haircuts, manicures, and eye treatments. One publication tracked down one of the imposter's former friends who revealed, "I went to high school with the guy, we were sort of close friends, and I know he gets people into trouble. He's a manipulator." Another friend would tell Sleaze-Rocks, "He's never changed. He was always hustling and scamming. I think he's a sociopath. He's got a talent for finding people who are gullible," he'd say. Even as far back as the late 80s, when Kuntz played in a variety of bands, including one called Majesty, he was frequently mistaken for Van Halen's David Lee Roth. Around the time of his arrest in 2008, Kuntz would meet a woman named Bobby Jo King after asking for directions to an AA meeting. He was able to convince King to come into his car and show him the directions to the meeting, and revealed to her that he was David Lee Roth. King was convinced that he was the real David Lee Roth and told her husband she was bringing the singer back to their house. Her husband, Bill, was so thrilled with the news, being a huge Van Halen fan, that he jumped the gun and told his friends who was coming to his house, only to later reveal to Sleaze-Rocks, "I've been humiliated by this. I told all my friends he was here, and now my answering machine is full of messages from them making fun of me." Then almost a decade later, it came out in 2017 that the impersonator was facing sex charges. He was arrested after going into a Long and McQuaid music store in both Chilliwack and Abbotsford in British Columbia in Western Canada, and told the staff that he was David Lee Roth. In 2019, he would go to his first trial where a mistrial would be declared. He was scheduled to go back to trial as recently as this summer, but there's been no updates on his case. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.